They say family is everything, but what happens when your family decides you're worth more dead than alive? My name is Elena Hartwell, and for 43 years I believed my husband Marcus and my stepchildren loved me. I was wrong, dead wrong, literally. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. Marcus had been acting strange for weeks, more attentive than usual, bringing me flowers, suggesting romantic getaways. After 15 years of marriage, this sudden surge of affection should have warmed my heart. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Something felt rehearsed about his gestures, like he was following a script. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra. Special for you, Elena, darling, he said one evening, setting down a glass of wine beside my reading chair. I've been thinking about our future, about securing everything for the kids. His stepchildren, Jason, 25, and Melissa, 23, had never really accepted me. Their biological mother had died when they were young, and I'd tried my best to fill that role, but I always remained the outsider, the woman who'd stolen their father's attention. What do you mean? I asked, not looking up from my book. The wine smelled wrong somehow, too sweet, with an underlying chemical tang that made me push it away untouched. Life insurance, Marcus continued, his voice carrying that practiced casualness that lawyers perfect. I know we've talked about it before, but I really think we should increase our coverage. You never know what might happen. That should have been my first real warning. Marcus was already well insured through his law firm, and we lived comfortably in our suburban Chicago home. But over the next few days, he kept bringing it up, always with that same forced nonchalance. I found this. Great policy, he announced a week later, sliding paperwork across the breakfast table. $2 million, and the premiums aren't bad at all. What do you think? $2 million. The number hung in the air like a death sentence I was too naive to recognize. I glanced at the forms: Metropolitan Life Insurance, comprehensive coverage, accidental death benefits. Everything looked legitimate. That seems like a lot, I said, pushing my untouched eggs around my plate. Lately, I'd been having trouble keeping food down. Stress, I told myself. Work had been demanding, and the atmosphere at home felt increasingly tense. Nothing's too much for my beautiful wife, Marcus replied, leaning over to kiss my forehead. His lips felt cold against my skin. Besides, with inflation these days, $2 million isn't what it used to be. Jason wandered into the kitchen then, all lanky limbs and barely concealed resentment. At 25, he was supposed to be building his own life, but he'd moved back home after losing yet another job. His girlfriend Sarah had followed, and now our house felt crowded with their whispered conversations and meaningful glances. Morning. Elena, Jason said with that polite smile that never reached his eyes. Dad, did you tell her about the cabin? What cabin? I looked between them, that familiar feeling of being excluded washing over me. I thought we could take a family trip, Marcus explained. Remember that place up in Wisconsin I used to rent when the kids were little? Perfect for a long weekend, get everyone together. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The kids. Even after 15 years, I was still not included in that category. Melissa chose that moment to make her entrance, all flowing blonde hair and perfect makeup despite the early hour. She'd inherited her father's good looks and her mother's ice-cold disposition. Oh, are we finally doing the cabin thing? She asked, pouring herself coffee. Sarah's been asking about it all week. Sarah. Jason's girlfriend had only been around for 6 months, but somehow she was more included in family planning than I was. I watched them all exchange looks, subtle nods and silent communications that excluded me completely. I don't know, I said slowly. Work's been crazy, and I'm not feeling great lately. That was an understatement. For the past month, I'd been experiencing dizzy spells, nausea, and a persistent fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. My doctor had run basic tests, but found nothing conclusive. Stress and hormones, he'd said dismissively. Women your age often experience these symptoms. Come on, Elena, Melissa cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. When's the last time we all spent quality time together? It'll be fun, like a real family. Like a real family. The word stung because they highlighted exactly what we'd never been. I was the stepmother, the second wife, the woman who'd tried too hard and never quite belonged. The insurance forms, Marcus said, sliding them closer to me. Could you sign these today? I'd like to get everything processed before our trip. Something about the timing bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I'd learned over the years to pick my battles with this family, and life insurance seemed reasonable enough. I signed the papers, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name. Perfect, Marcus said, gathering the documents with what seemed like unseemly haste. I'll get these submitted right away. The next few days blurred together in a haze of preparation and increasingly strange behavior from everyone around me. Marcus kept bringing me tea and vitamins, insisting I needed to build up my strength for the trip. The vitamins were new, large, white pills that left a bitter aftertaste and made me feel even more sluggish. Are you sure these are right? I asked, holding up the bottle. The label was generic, none of the usual brand names I recognized. Special formula, Marcus assured me. The pharmacist recommended them specifically for women dealing with fatigue. Trust me, I researched this thoroughly. Trust him. I'd been doing that for 15 years, even when my instincts screamed otherwise. Even when I caught whispered phone conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. Even when I noticed Jason and Melissa spending an unusual amount of time together, plotting something in hushed tones. Work became my refuge, the one place where I still felt competent and valued. As a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm, I'd built a reputation for thoroughness and integrity. My colleagues respected me, sought my advice, treated me like the intelligent woman I was instead of the burden I'd apparently become at home. You look terrible, my friend and coworker Janet said bluntly during lunch one day. When's the last time you took a real vacation? Marcus wants to take me to some cabin in Wisconsin this weekend, I replied, picking at my salad. Even bland lettuce seemed too much for my queasy stomach lately. That sounds nice. Romantic getaway? I almost laughed. With the kids and Jason's girlfriend. Real romantic. Janet frowned. Elena, can I ask you something? Are things okay at home? You've seemed different lately. Distracted. How could I explain the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong without sounding paranoid? How could I tell her that my own family felt like strangers, that I sometimes caught them staring at me with expressions I couldn't decipher? I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. But I wasn't fine, and that afternoon, something happened that made everything click into terrifying focus. I'd forgotten my purse at home and had to return unexpectedly to get it. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices from inside. Marcus, Jason, and Melissa, all talking animatedly. Has to look natural, Marcus was saying. No room for mistakes. What if she fights back? That was Jason sounding nervous. She won't, Melissa replied confidently. Not with the stuff you've been giving her. She can barely stay awake half the time. My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the door, straining to hear more. The timing has to be perfect, Marcus continued. Saturday night, after dinner, we'll make it look like she wandered off, maybe fell. The lake's deep enough, and with the current medications in her system, the vitamins, the constant fatigue, the nausea, the way everything felt like I was moving through thick fog. They'd been drugging me, slowly and systematically preparing me for... What? $2 million, Melissa said dreamily. Split 4 ways, that's $500,000 each. $500,000, Jason agreed. Enough to start over. 4 ways. Marcus, Jason, Melissa, and Sarah. I wasn't family. I was a victim. Backed away from the door on shaking legs, my mind reeling. They were planning to kill me. My husband of 15 years, the children I'd helped raise, they were planning to murder me for insurance money and make it look like an accident. The cabin. The isolated location. The deep lake Marcus had mentioned. The family trip that would give them the perfect opportunity and alibi. They'd probably already worked out the story. Poor Elena, struggling with depression and medication side effects, wandering away from the cabin in the night, accidentally falling into the dark water. Drove back to work on autopilot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to call the police, to expose their plan immediately. But what proof did I have? A partially overheard conversation that could be explained away? My word against theirs? Marcus was a respected lawyer with connections throughout the legal system. Jason and Melissa were his grieving children who'd already lost one mother. I was the unstable second wife, probably already exhibiting signs of mental distress thanks to whatever they'd been slipping into my food and drinks. No, I needed evidence. Real, undeniable proof of what they were planning. That evening, I pretended everything was normal. I choked down the dinner Marcus had prepared, avoiding the wine that still smelled wrong. I took the vitamins he handed. Me but palmed them instead of swallowing, later flushing them down the toilet. "Feeling better, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, his concern so perfectly performed it made me sick. "Much better," I lied. "I'm actually looking forward to the cabin trip." See, a smile that spread across his face was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Pure predatory satisfaction, quickly masked by practiced affection. "I'm so glad," he said. "It's going to be perfect. Absolutely perfect." That night, I lay awake listening to Marcus's breathing beside me, planning my own survival. They thought they were so clever, so careful in their plotting. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I wasn't going to be their victim. I was going to be their worst nightmare. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Every suspicious conversation, every forced smile, every pill I was offered. I set up a hidden camera in the kitchen, disguised as a decorative clock, to record their interactions when they thought I wasn't around. I also did something else, something that would prove crucial in the days to come. I made copies of all our important documents, including the life insurance policy Marcus had been so eager for me to sign. I stored everything in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, along with a detailed letter explaining my suspicions. If they succeeded in killing me, at least there would be a trail. But I had no intention of dying. Not for their convenience, not for their money, and certainly not in some staged accident that would let them walk away as grieving family members. Friday. Morning arrived with Marcus practically vibrating with excitement. The bags were packed, the cabin was reserved, and everything was falling into place exactly as they'd planned. "Ready for our family adventure?" he asked, loading the last suitcase into our SUV. Jason and Melissa were already in the back seat with Sarah, all of them chattering about the weekend ahead with an enthusiasm that would have seemed natural to anyone who didn't know what I knew. "Ready," I said, settling into the passenger seat. As we pulled out of the driveway, I caught Melissa's eyes in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. She thought she was looking at a dead woman. She was wrong. The drive to Wisconsin took 3 hours, winding through increasingly rural landscape until we reached the isolated cabin Marcus had rented. It sat on the shore of a deep, dark lake, surrounded by dense woods with no other houses in sight. The perfect place for an accident. "Isn't it beautiful?" Marcus said as we unloaded the car. "So peaceful, so secluded." That evening, they all made an effort to seem like a loving family. We cooked dinner together, played board games, shared stories and laughter that felt rehearsed and hollow. Every smile was a lie, every gesture calculated, but I played along, biding my time, waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. Tomorrow, they planned to make me disappear forever. Tomorrow, I would expose them all. Saturday morning dawned, gray and overcast, the lake's surface reflecting the threatening sky like black glass. I woke early, my body finally clear-headed after avoiding the drugged vitamins for 3 days. The difference was remarkable. The fog that had clouded my thoughts was lifting, replaced by sharp, crystalline focus. Marcus was still asleep beside me, one arm thrown across my side of the bed in what might have looked like affection to an outsider. To me, it felt like a cage. I slipped out carefully, padding barefoot to the kitchen where I started the coffee maker, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "Morning, Elena." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair tousled from sleep. She wore an oversized t-shirt that probably belonged to Jason, playing the part of the innocent girlfriend caught up in someone else's family drama. But I'd seen the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, calculating, measuring, like she was already spending her share of the insurance money. "Morning?" I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Coffee?" "Please." She settled at the kitchen table, and I could feel her watching me as I moved around the small space. "You seem better today. More alert." The word choice was telling. Alert. As opposed to the drugged stupor they'd been keeping me in for weeks. "I feel wonderful," I said, handing her a mug. "Like I'm finally myself again." Something flickered in her eyes. Concern, maybe even fear. She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly, probably alerting the others that their carefully managed victim was showing signs of recovery. Jason wandered in a few minutes later, followed by Melissa. Both of them seemed tense, their usual, morning banter replaced by nervous energy. Marcus appeared last, freshly showered and wearing his devoted husband expression like a well-fitted mask. "How's my beautiful wife this morning?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. His embrace felt like a snake coiling around its prey. "Perfect," I said, leaning back against him. "I was thinking we should go hiking today. I have so much energy." The suggestion hung in the air like a grenade. They'd obviously planned a quiet day, keeping me sedated and compliant until evening when they could execute their final plan. My sudden enthusiasm was throwing them off script. "Hiking?" Marcus's voice was carefully controlled. "Are you sure? You've been so tired lately." "That's exactly why I want to get out and move around," I insisted. "Fresh air, exercise, it's just what I need." I watched them exchange glances across the kitchen, quick, worried looks that confirmed everything I suspected. They needed me weak and disoriented for whatever they had planned. "Maybe we should take it easy today," Melissa suggested, her voice saccharine sweet. "We could just relax by the lake, read some books. Or you could try those new vitamins Dad brought," Jason added quickly. "The ones specifically for energy." There it was. They were going to drug me again, probably with something stronger since their gradual approach wasn't working fast enough. "You know what?" I said, putting on my brightest smile. "You're absolutely right. I should probably stick to my routine." I held out my hand to Marcus. "The vitamins?" Relief flooded his face as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle. The pills inside were different from the ones I'd been palming. Larger, with a slight blue tint that spoke of something far more potent than simple sedatives. I shook 2 pills into my palm, raised them to my mouth, and pretended to swallow while actually sliding them under my tongue. "There," I said, taking a large gulp of coffee to sell the deception. "Give me an hour and I'll be ready for anything." The transformation in their demeanor was immediate. Shoulders relaxed, smiles became genuine, and that awful tension dissolved as they believed their plan was back on track. "Why don't you go lie down for a bit?" Marcus suggested. Let those vitamins work their magic. I nodded and headed back to the bedroom, making sure to close the door loudly behind me. But instead of lying down, I went straight to the bathroom and spat out the pills, examining them carefully. The blue tint was even more pronounced up close, and when I scratched one with my fingernail, it revealed a powdery interior that definitely wasn't any vitamin I'd ever seen. I photographed the pills with my phone, then wrapped them in tissue and tucked them into my makeup bag. Evidence for later, assuming there was a later. From the bedroom, I could hear them talking in the kitchen, their voices low but urgent. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch fragments of their conversation. Should work faster than before, needs to be completely out by 8. Lake's deepest right off the dock. My blood ran cold. 8 o'clock. They were planning to kill me at 8 o'clock tonight. I spent the next hour lying on the bed, forcing myself to breathe slowly and evenly while my mind raced through possibilities. They would expect the drugs to take effect, making me drowsy and compliant. I needed to play the part while staying alert enough to defend myself when the time came. Around noon, I emerged from the bedroom, deliberately stumbling slightly and blinking as if fighting off drowsiness. "There's my sleepy girl," Marcus said, steadying me with hands that felt like they belonged to a stranger. "Feeling better?" I mumbled, letting my head loll against his shoulder. "Tired, though. Really tired." "That's normal," he assured me, his voice filled with false concern. "Your body's just adjusting. Why don't we get some lunch in you?" Lunch was a carefully orchestrated performance. They took turns keeping me engaged in conversation while Marcus prepared my plate, adding what I was certain were additional drugs to my food. I ate slowly, pushing food around on my plate and surreptitiously dropping pieces into my napkin when they weren't looking. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of forced family activities. We played cards, but I deliberately made poor choices, claiming the numbers were swimming on the cards. We watched a movie, during which I pretended to doze on the couch. All the while, I was hyper-aware of every movement, every whispered consultation, between my would-be killers. Around 5 o'clock, Melissa suggested we start preparing dinner. "Something special," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "A real family feast." I volunteered to help, which seemed to surprise them. In their minds, I should have been barely functional by now, not offering to assist with meal preparation. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "You seem pretty out of it." "I want to help," I insisted, swaying slightly for effect. "It's important to me." They let me wash vegetables and set the table while they handled the more complex aspects of cooking. I watched everything carefully, noting when Marcus added something extra to the wine he poured for me, when Melissa accidentally knocked over the salt shaker near my plate and quickly cleaned it up. They were being thorough, making sure whatever they gave me would work quickly and completely. Dinner was a surreal experience. We sat around the small cabin table like a normal family, sharing stories and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. But underneath the facade, I could feel their anticipation building. Every glance at the clock, every forced smile, every gentle inquiry about how I was feeling, it all pointed toward 8 o'clock. I played my part perfectly, growing progressively more sluggish as the evening wore on. I slurred my words slightly, dropped my fork twice, and complained of feeling dizzy and strange. "Maybe you should lie down," Marcus suggested around 7:30, his voice thick with concern that didn't match the cold calculation in his eyes. "No," I said, gripping the table for support. "I want to see the lake. It's so beautiful at sunset." That was exactly what they wanted to hear. I could see the relief in their faces as I unknowingly walked into their trap. "That's a wonderful idea," Melissa said quickly. "The dock has the best view." We all trooped outside, the cool evening air sharp against my skin. The lake stretched out before us, its dark surface broken only by the occasional ripple. In the distance, I could see storm clouds gathering, promising rain before morning. The dock extended about 20 feet into the water, its wooden planks weathered but sturdy. At the end, a small bench provided the perfect spot for watching sunsets, or pushing someone into deep, dark water. "Why don't you sit down, sweetheart?" Marcus suggested, guiding me toward the bench. "Rest for a moment." I allowed myself to be led forward, my steps deliberately unsteady. Behind me, I could hear the others following, their footsteps soft on the wooden planks. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my breathing slow and deep, maintaining the illusion of drugged compliance. The bench was positioned at the very edge of the dock, with nothing but black water beyond. One good push, and I would disappear into the lake's depths. Another tragic accident that would leave my loving family devastated but financially secure. I sat down heavily, letting my head droop as if I could barely stay upright. "I don't feel good," I mumbled. "Something's wrong." "Shh," Marcus said, settling beside me. His hand found my back, ostensibly comforting but positioned perfectly to push me forward. "Everything's going to be okay." The others arranged themselves around us, Jason to my left, Melissa and Sarah standing behind the bench. I was surrounded, trapped at the end of a dock with nowhere to run. "Elena?" Marcus said softly, his voice carrying a finality that made my skin crawl. "I need you to know how much I've loved you. How much we all have. Past tense." He was already speaking about me as if I were dead. "I love you too," I whispered, and for a moment, my voice broke with genuine emotion. Despite everything, despite the poison and the lies and the elaborate murder plot, part of me still mourned the family I'd thought we were. "Close your eyes," he said gently. "Just rest." This was it. The moment they'd been building toward all evening, all month, possibly longer. I let my eyes drift shut and felt Marcus's hand press more firmly against my back. "Sweet dreams, Elena," he murmured, and then he pushed. But I was ready. Instead of falling forward into the water as they'd planned, I threw myself sideways off the bench, rolling away from the edge of the dock. At the same time, I pulled out my phone and activated the voice recording app I'd prepared. "What?" Marcus started, but I was already speaking, my voice clear and strong. "This is Elena Hartwell, and it's 8:47 p.m. on Saturday, October 14th. My husband, Marcus Hartwell, just attempted to push me into the lake after drugging me for weeks. Present are Jason Hartwell, Melissa Hartwell, and Sarah Mitchell, all participants in this murder plot for my life insurance money." The shocked silence that followed was broken only by the sound of water lapping against the dock and the distant rumble of approaching thunder. "Elena?" Marcus said carefully, his mask finally slipping to reveal the cold stranger underneath. "You're hallucinating. The medication is making you paranoid." I laughed, and the sound was sharp as broken glass in the evening air. "The medication? You mean the poison you've been feeding me for weeks? These pills?" I pulled the tissue-wrapped evidence from my pocket. "The ones that aren't vitamins at all?" Jason stepped forward, his young face twisted with panic. "She's lost it. She's completely delusional." "Am I?" I stood up slowly, making sure to stay well away from the edge. "Should I call the police and have these pills analyzed? Should I show them the recording I just made of my husband attempting to murder me?" Melissa's composure cracked first. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against all of ours." "Actually," I said, pulling up another app on my phone, "I've been streaming this entire conversation live to my social media accounts. Say hello to my 3,000 followers, everyone." The blood drained from their faces as they realized their carefully planned murder had just been broadcast to the internet. In the space of 5 minutes, they'd gone from grieving family members to exposed killers. "You're insane," Sarah spat, her sweet girlfriend act dissolving completely. "No one will believe this." "They will when the coroner analyzes what you've been feeding me," I replied. "They will when they see the insurance policy Marcus rushed me to sign." They will when they examine your financial records and discover how desperate you all are for money. Marcus was staring at me like I'd risen from the dead, which, in a way, I had. Elena, please. We can work this out. We can what? Pretend you didn't just try to kill me? Pretend the last month of systematic poisoning was all in my imagination? Thrive. Storm clouds chose that moment to open up, sending fat raindrops pattering onto the dock around us. The perfect, pathetic fallacy for a family destroyed by greed. The live stream is still running, I announced, raising my voice over the increasing rain. Everyone watching just heard Marcus Hartwell admit they've been medicating me against my will. They heard you all discuss my insurance money. They saw you try to push me into the lake. That's when Jason snapped. "Shut up!" he screamed, lunging toward me. "Just shut up." But I was faster, sidestepping his clumsy charge and sending him stumbling toward the very edge they'd intended for me. For a terrifying moment, it looked like he might actually fall in. But Marcus grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "The police are on their way," I announced, which wasn't true yet, but would be soon. "I suggest you all start thinking about your defense strategies." As if summoned by my words, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night air. Someone watching the live stream had called it in, probably multiple someones. The cavalry was coming. The next 20 minutes were a blur of flashing lights, shouted questions, and the slow, methodical process of law enforcement taking control of the situation. The four of them tried to maintain their innocence at first, claiming I was having a mental breakdown, that they'd only been trying to help me, but the evidence was overwhelming. The pills I'd saved, the recorded confession, the live stream that had captured everything. It painted a picture no lawyer could explain away. Not even Marcus with all his courtroom experience. As they were led away in handcuffs, Marcus turned, back to look at me one last time. "I really did love you once," he said quietly. "No," I replied, standing tall despite everything. "You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone to control, someone to use. You never loved me at all." And as the police cars disappeared into the night, taking my would-be killers away, I realized something profound. I was finally, truly free. The first thing I noticed when I woke up in the hospital the next morning wasn't the sterile smell of disinfectant or the steady beeping of monitors. It was my phone buzzing incessantly on the bedside table. The screen showed 8:47, missed calls, thousands of text messages, and notification after notification from every social media platform I'd ever joined. "You're awake," said Detective Martinez, looking up from her notepad in the chair beside my bed. She was a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that probably served her well in her line of work. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been poisoned for weeks and almost murdered by my own family," I said, my voice hoarse. "So, relatively speaking, pretty good." She smiled grimly. "Your blood work came back. We found traces of Rohypnol, Ambien, and something called quetiapine in your system. That's a powerful antipsychotic that would explain the confusion and disorientation you've been experiencing." The medical confirmation of what I'd suspected hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just been planning to kill me, they'd been systematically destroying my mind first, making me doubt my own perceptions and memories. "How long?" I asked. "Based on the levels and degradation patterns, we estimate they've been drugging you for at least 6 weeks, probably longer. It's a miracle you were coherent enough to outmaneuver them last night." Detective Martinez pulled out her phone and showed me a video that had already accumulated over 2 million views. It was my live stream from the dock, titled "Woman Exposes Family's Murder Plot Live." The timestamp showed it had been posted 18 hours ago. "This has gone viral beyond anything we've seen in a domestic case," she said. "The FBI's involved now because it crossed state lines when you streamed it. The insurance company has frozen all policies and opened their own investigation. And..." She paused, looking uncomfortable. Well, you might want to prepare yourself for what's waiting outside. Through the hospital window, I could see news vans lined up in the parking lot like metal vultures. Reporters with microphones and cameras were conducting interviews with anyone who would talk to them. The story had exploded beyond a simple attempted murder case. It had become a cultural phenomenon. Mrs. Hartwell, Detective Martinez continued, "We need to discuss what happens next. Your husband and stepchildren are being held without bail, but their lawyer is already claiming mental illness and manipulation. They're saying you orchestrated the whole thing to frame them." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess. Marcus is representing himself?" "Actually, no. He hired Patricia Blackwood." That stopped me cold. Patricia Blackwood was one of the most notorious defense attorneys in the country, the kind of lawyer who could convince a jury that the victim was actually the perpetrator. If Marcus had hired her, he was planning to go to war. "She's already given a statement to the press," Detective Martinez said, pulling up another video on her phone. "You should see this." The video showed Patricia Blackwood standing outside the county courthouse, her silver hair perfectly styled and her expression radiating confidence. Behind her, a crowd of reporters pressed forward with microphones and cameras. "My clients are the real victims here," she was saying, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never lost a case she cared about winning. "Elena Hartwell is a deeply disturbed woman who manipulated her family for years. She orchestrated this entire scenario to destroy them financially and emotionally. The so-called evidence she claims to have is fabricated, and the live stream was nothing more than a carefully planned performance designed to gain public sympathy." A reporter shouted a question about the drugs found in my system. "My clients were trying to help a woman suffering from severe mental illness," Blackwood replied smoothly. "The medications found in her blood were prescribed by a doctor and administered with love and concern. Elena Hartwell has twisted their compassion into something sinister because she cannot face the reality of her own psychological breakdown." I felt sick watching it. She was good, really good. In 30 seconds, she'd managed to plant doubt about everything that had happened, turning me from victim to villain with surgical precision. "There's more," Detective Martinez said reluctantly. She showed me another video, this one from a morning talk show. The chyron at the bottom read, "Family. Friend speaks out about Elena Hartwell's disturbing behavior." The woman on screen was someone I vaguely recognized, Linda Morrison, a neighbor I'd chatted with occasionally at community events. But the Linda on TV was describing a completely different person than the woman I knew myself to be. "Elena always seemed off," Linda was saying, her face arranged in an expression of concerned sadness. "She was obsessive about money, constantly talking about insurance policies and what would happen if something happened to Marcus. And the way she treated those poor children, she was so cold to them, so calculating. I always felt sorry for Marcus, being married to someone so manipulative." "This is insane," I said, gripping the hospital bed rails. "I barely know this woman. We've maybe had 5 conversations in 15 years. "It gets worse," Detective Martinez warned. She showed me a headline from a major news website. "Elena Hartwell, master manipulator or victim. Neighbors describe pattern of disturbing behavior." The article was filled with quotes from people I'd never met, describing incidents that had never happened. According to these witnesses, I'd been plotting against my family for years, displaying signs of paranoia and violence, making threats about what I'd do if they ever tried to leave me. "Someone's orchestrating this," I said, my mind racing. "This isn't random. These people are being coached, probably paid." Detective Martinez nodded. "We think so too. The speed and coordination of these statements suggests a professional PR campaign. Blackwood has connections with some very expensive reputation management firms." My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at it automatically. The notification was from Twitter, showing that my livestream video had been shared by a major celebrity with 30 million followers. The caption read, "This woman is a hero. Family tried to murder her for insurance money and she caught them red-handed. Justice for Elena. Family betrayal. It's not all bad, Detective Martinez said, noticing my expression. Public opinion is largely on your side. The live stream was too raw, too genuine to be fake. Most people can see through the PR campaign. She was right. As I scrolled through the comments and shares, I saw an outpouring of support that was overwhelming in its intensity. Women sharing their own stories of family betrayal, men expressing outrage at Marcus's actions, people from all walks of life united in their anger at what had been done to me. But there was also a darker undercurrent. Conspiracy theorists claiming the whole thing was staged for social media fame, misogynists suggesting I'd somehow deserved what happened, and worst of all, people doxing my family members, sharing their addresses and phone numbers, calling for vigilante justice. This is getting out of control, I said, showing Detective Martinez some of the more extreme comments. We're monitoring the situation, she assured me. But I have to ask, do you have somewhere safe to go when you're discharged? Your house is surrounded by media, and some of the threats we're seeing online are concerning. I hadn't thought about that. In all the chaos, I'd forgotten that I no longer had a home to return to. The house where I'd lived for 15 years was a crime scene now, and even if it wasn't, the memories of what had happened there would make it uninhabitable. I don't know, I admitted. I suppose I could get a hotel room somewhere. Actually, Detective Martinez said, there might be another option. A producer from 60 Minutes called this morning. They want to do an exclusive interview, and they're offering to put you up in a secure location while they prepare the piece. Full protection, legal support, the works. Media circus isn't exactly what I need right now. Maybe not, but it might. Be your best defense against Blackwood's narrative. She's going to try to destroy you in the court of public opinion before this ever gets to trial. Fighting back might be your only option. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Elena Hartwell? The voice was male, older, with the kind of authority that suggested someone used to getting what they wanted. Yes. This is Charles Morrison from Morrison, Swift and Associates. We're a law firm specializing in high-profile criminal defense and civil litigation. I've been following your case, and I'd like to offer my services. I'm sorry, but I can't afford pro bono, he interrupted. Mrs. Hartwell, what's happened to you is one of the most egregious cases of domestic betrayal I've seen in 30 years of practice. Patricia Blackwood is going to try to destroy you, and you need someone with equal skill to fight back. I looked at Detective Martinez, who was listening to my end of the conversation with interest. What would that involve? I asked. Complete legal representation in all criminal and civil matters arising from this case. We'll also handle media relations, coordinate with law enforcement, and pursue civil damages against your attackers. Additionally, we'll investigate the PR campaign being used against you and expose whoever's funding it. It was exactly what I needed, but I'd learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. Why pro bono? What's in it for you? Morrison chuckled. Mrs. Hartwell, your case is going to be the biggest legal story of the year. The publicity value alone is worth millions. Beyond that, I have 3 daughters, and the idea of what your family tried to do to you keeps me awake at night. Some cases are about more than money. I made my decision. When can we meet? I'm in the hospital parking lot. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a secure conference room with Charles Morrison and his team of associates, going through every detail of the case with the methodical precision of people who lived for complex legal battles. Morrison was everything I'd hoped for: sharp, experienced, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting his clients. His team had already identified 17 separate felony charges that could be brought against Marcus and the others, ranging from attempted murder to insurance fraud to conspiracy. The prosecution's case is rock solid, Morrison explained. Between the live stream, the physical evidence, and your testimony, conviction is virtually certain. But Blackwood isn't trying to win in court. She's trying to win in the media. If she can convince enough people that you're the real villain, it poisons the jury pool and creates grounds for appeal. So what do? We tell your story first, and we tell it better. He slid a contract across the table. The 60 Minutes interview is just the beginning. We're going to systematically dismantle every lie they've told about you, expose the PR campaign, and make sure the world knows exactly who the real victims are in this case. I signed the contract without hesitation. The war for my reputation and my life was just beginning. That evening, as I prepared to leave the hospital under heavy security, my phone buzzed with one more notification. It was a text from an unknown number, but the message made my blood freeze. You think you've won, but this is far from over. Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame, Elena. When the world gets bored of your sob story, we'll still be here. And next time, there won't be any cameras to save you. I showed the message to Detective Martinez, who immediately contacted the FBI's cybercrime unit. But as our convoy pulled away from the hospital and headed toward the safe house Morrison had arranged, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The live stream had saved my life and exposed my family's crimes, but it had also made me the center of a media firestorm that threatened to consume everything in its path. As we drove through the Chicago night, past crowds of protesters both supporting and condemning me, I realized that surviving my family's murder plot might have been the easy part. Now I had to survive being famous for it. The safe house Morrison had arranged turned out to be a penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago, complete with bulletproof windows and a security team that looked like they'd stepped out of a military thriller. I'd gone from suburban housewife to protected witness in less than 48 hours, and the adjustment was surreal. Mrs. Hartwell, said Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's white-collar crime division as she spread files across the dining room table. We've been investigating your husband's finances, and what we've found goes far deeper than simple insurance fraud. I settled into the chair across from her, my coffee growing cold as I tried to process everything that had happened. Agent Chen was young, maybe early 30s, but her eyes held the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested she'd seen more than her share of financial crimes. What do you mean? I asked. Marcus has been stealing from his law firm for at least 3 years, she said, opening the first file. Embezzlement, client fund manipulation, fraudulent billing practices. We estimate he's taken close to $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $2 million? But our finances seemed fine. We lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Because he's been using the stolen money to cover increasing debts. Gambling, primarily. Your husband has a serious addiction to high-stakes poker games, both online and in private clubs. He owes money to some very dangerous people. Agent Chen showed me printouts of bank statements and financial records that painted a picture of a man spiraling completely out of control. Massive transfers to gambling sites, cash withdrawals of $50,000 at a time, loans from offshore accounts with interest rates that would make loan sharks blush. Jason and Melissa knew about this? I asked. They were in debt too. Jason owes over $300,000 in student loans and credit card debt. Melissa's fashion boutique has been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. Sarah Mitchell, the girlfriend, has her own problems. She's been running a social media scam targeting elderly people. It was like discovering I'd been living with strangers for 15 years. Every person I'd trusted, every relationship I'd believed in, had been built on lies and desperation. So the insurance money wasn't just greed, I said slowly. It was survival. Exactly. They were all facing financial ruin. Your death would have solved everyone's problems. Marcus could pay off his gambling debts, the kids could start fresh, and Sarah could disappear before her scam was discovered. Agent Chen opened another file, this one containing surveillance photos and financial records related to Patricia Blackwood. The defense attorney? I asked. We think she's been hired with money that doesn't exist. Blackwood's fees start at $50,000 just for a consultation. Marcus paid her $200,000 upfront, money that came from an account linked to Vincent Torino. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Agent Chen said it suggested I should be worried. Who's Vincent Torino? One of the most dangerous loan sharks in the Midwest. Marcus owes him over $800,000, and Torino has a reputation for collecting his debts in very unpleasant ways. My blood ran cold. Are you saying Torino is funding Marcus's defense? We think so. Which means this case isn't just about murder and insurance fraud anymore. We're looking at money laundering, racketeering, and organized crime connections. Before I could fully process this information, my phone rang. Charles Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Elena. His voice was tight with controlled anger when I answered. Have you seen the news this morning? No, I've been talking to the FBI. Why? Turn on Channel 7, now. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. The anchor was introducing a segment with the kind of breathless excitement that suggested breaking news. In an exclusive interview, Marcus Hartwell speaks from jail about his wife's alleged mental illness and the elaborate hoax she orchestrated to destroy their family. The screen cut to footage of Marcus in an orange jumpsuit, sitting across from a reporter in what was obviously the county jail's visiting room. But this wasn't the broken man I'd expected to see. He looked composed, sympathetic, even charismatic. I want people to understand that Elena is sick, he was saying, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine concern. She's been struggling with severe depression and paranoid delusions for months. We tried to get her help, but she refused treatment. The reporter leaned forward. Are you saying she made up the entire murder plot? I'm saying she believed it was real because her mental illness made her perceive our attempts to help as threats. The medications we gave her were prescribed by her psychiatrist. The insurance policy was something she insisted on purchasing. Everything she claims we did to hurt her was actually us trying to save her life. I stared at the screen in disbelief. He's lying. There was no psychiatrist. I never insisted on any insurance policy. Agent Chen was taking notes furiously. We'll check all of that. If he's fabricating medical records, that's additional federal charges. But Marcus wasn't finished. The interview continued with him showing what appeared to be medical documents and prescription bottles. Here's the prescription for the antipsychotic medication, he said, holding up a bottle. Dr. Robert Kimmel prescribed it after Elena had a complete breakdown in his office. She was talking about conspiracy theories, claiming people were trying to poison her. Sound familiar? The reporter examined the bottle. This appears to be legitimate. Can you tell us about Elena's behavior leading up to the incident at the lake? She was getting worse every day. Paranoid, aggressive, talking about elaborate plots against her. The night at the cabin, we were trying to calm her down when she suddenly started screaming that we were trying to kill her. She recorded it and streamed it online as some kind of performance piece. We think she honestly believed it was real. I felt like I was watching my reality being systematically dismantled on live television. Every piece of evidence I had was being explained away. Every moment of terror I'd experienced was being reframed as mental illness. This is impossible, I said to Agent Chen. He can't have fabricated all of this so quickly. Actually, she said grimly, he can. With enough money and the right connections, medical records can be backdated, prescriptions can be planted, witnesses can be coached. If Torino is involved, he has access to people who specialize in this kind of thing. The interview concluded with Marcus making a direct appeal to the camera. I love my wife, he said, his eyes glistening with what looked like genuine tears. I just want her to get the help she needs. This whole situation is a tragedy, but Elena is the victim here, a victim of her own illness. I pray that someday she'll be well enough to understand what really happened. The screen cut back to the anchor, who was joined by a panel of experts ready to dissect every aspect of the case. A forensic psychiatrist was already speculating about my mental state. A legal analyst was questioning whether I could be held responsible for filing false police reports, and a social media expert was discussing the dangers of viral vigilante justice. I turned off the TV and sat in stunned silence. In the span of 20 minutes, Marcus had managed to plant seeds of doubt about everything I'd said and done. Worse, he'd done it with apparent evidence and professional credibility. "How do we fight this?" I asked Morrison when he arrived an hour later. "With facts," he said grimly. "But it's going to be harder than I thought. They're not just trying to discredit you. They're building an alternate reality so convincing that even I'm starting to wonder about some details." "You're wondering? You're my lawyer." "Which is why I need you to be completely honest with me," Morrison said, settling into the chair across from me. "Have you ever been treated for mental illness? Have you ever taken antipsychotic medication? Is there any truth to what Marcus is claiming?" The questions felt like betrayals, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No, none of it is true. I've never seen a psychiatrist named Robert Kimmel. I've never taken antipsychotic medication, and I certainly never insisted on a $2 million life insurance policy." "Then we prove it," Morrison said. "Agent Chen, what can you tell us about this Dr. Kimmel?" "We're investigating him now," she replied. "Preliminary checks show he's a real doctor with a real practice, but we're looking into whether he's ever actually treated Elena. We're also analyzing the prescription bottles to see if they're legitimate or planted evidence." My phone buzzed with another notification. This time it was a text from my friend Janet at work. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I just saw the news about your medical records. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling so much?" Could have helped. My heart sank. If Janet, who knew me better than almost anyone, was starting to believe Marcus's version of events, then his strategy was working. I showed the text to Morrison. "It's starting," he said. "The narrative is taking hold. We need to move fast." "What do you suggest?" "The 60 Minutes interview. We tape it tomorrow and we make sure it airs before Marcus can do any more damage." "But Elena, you need to understand something. This is going to be the most important conversation of your life. Everything you say will be analyzed, fact-checked, and scrutinized. One inconsistency, one moment of doubt, and they'll use it to destroy you." The rest of the day was spent in intensive preparation. Morrison's team drilled me on every aspect of my story, looking for potential weaknesses that hostile questioners might exploit. They brought in a media consultant who taught me how to speak clearly and confidently on camera, how to handle aggressive questioning, and how to present myself as credible and sympathetic. But even as we prepared, the news cycle continued to turn against me. By evening, 3 more neighbors had come forward with stories about my erratic behavior. A former coworker claimed I'd talked about wanting my husband dead. Even the grocery store clerk where I shopped was quoted as saying I'd seemed unhinged during recent visits. "It's like they have an entire army of people willing to lie about me," I said to Agent Chen during our evening debrief. "That's exactly what they have," she confirmed. "We've traced payments from Torino's organization to at least 8 people who've given statements about you. It's a sophisticated character assassination campaign." "But surely the FBI can prove these people are lying?" "Eventually, yes. But criminal investigations take time, and public opinion moves fast. By the time we can prove these witnesses are perjuring themselves, the damage to your credibility will be done." That night, alone in the safe house's master bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd saved my own life only to watch it be destroyed in a different way. Outside, the city hummed with late-night activity, but I felt more isolated than I ever had in my life. My phone buzzed with one final message before I tried to sleep. This one was from an unknown number, but the content made my blood freeze. "Enjoying your 15 minutes of fame? Too bad you won't live to see how this story ends. Some accidents can't be live-streamed." I immediately called Agent Chen, who assured me the threat would be investigated and security would be increased. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus and his allies were just getting started. Tomorrow's interview with 60 Minutes would either save my reputation or provide them with enough ammunition to finish the job they'd started at the lake. Either way, I knew that the real battle for my life was just beginning. The live stream had exposed their murder plot, but now I was fighting for something even more precious than my physical survival. I was fighting for the truth itself. The 60 Palais. Minute's studio felt like a gladiatorial arena disguised as a living room. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and a coffee table arranged with deceptive casualness. But I could feel the weight of the cameras, the scrutiny of the production crew, and the knowledge that millions of people would judge every word I spoke. Leslie. Stahl sat across from me, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that had made her one of the most respected journalists in America. She'd spent 30 years exposing liars and frauds, and I knew she wouldn't give me any special treatment just because I claimed to be a victim. "Elena," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Your husband Marcus says you're suffering from severe mental illness, that the entire murder plot you described was a delusion brought on by paranoid psychosis. How do you respond to that?" I practiced this moment dozens of times with Morrison's media consultant. But sitting there under the hot studio lights, I felt the weight of everyone who'd ever doubted me pressing down like a physical force. "Leslie," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured, 3 days ago, I would have told you that Marcus was the love of my life, that my stepchildren were difficult but ultimately good kids who'd been through trauma. I wanted to believe we were a family, but the evidence doesn't lie. Let's talk about that evidence. Marcus has provided what appear to be legitimate medical records showing you were prescribed antipsychotic medication by Dr. Robert Kimmel. Are those records accurate? No. I've never met Dr. Kimmel in my life, and I've never taken antipsychotic medication until my family started slipping it into my food without my knowledge. Stahl leaned forward slightly. But how can you be sure? If you were experiencing paranoid delusions, wouldn't you naturally distrust any medical treatment? It was a fair question, and exactly the kind of logical trap that Marcus's defense team was hoping I'd fall into. But Morrison had prepared me for this. "Leslie, I brought something that might help answer that question." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "This is a conversation I recorded with my family. Physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, not Agent Chen, different person, yesterday morning." Stahl nodded, and the production team played the audio. "Dr. Chen, this is Elena Hartwell. I'm calling about my medical records." "Elena, of course. How are you holding up?" "I need to ask you directly. Have you ever referred me to a psychiatrist?" "Named Robert Kimmel?" "Robert Kimmel? No, I've never heard that name." "Elena, I've been your physician for 8 years, and I've never referred you for psychiatric treatment. You've never exhibited any signs of mental illness that would warrant such a referral. And have you ever prescribed antipsychotic medication for me?" "Absolutely not." "Elena, what's this about? Are you taking antipsychotic medication? Because, based on your medical history, that could be extremely dangerous." The recording ended, and Stahl looked thoughtful. "That's compelling. But couldn't Dr. Kimmel have been treating you without your regular physician's knowledge?" "He could have been," I agreed. "Except for one problem." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot. "Dr. Robert Kimmel has been dead for 6 months. He died in a car accident last March." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the camera operators seemed to pause in their work. "You're saying the medical records Marcus provided show treatment from a deceased?" "Doctor?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. The FBI confirmed it yesterday. Someone created fake medical records using a dead psychiatrist's credentials, then backdated them to make it look like I'd been receiving treatment for months." Stahl's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing genuine surprise. That's an extraordinarily sophisticated level of fraud. Who would have the resources and expertise to create convincing fake medical records?" Someone with a lot of money and connections to people who specialize in document forgery. Someone like Vincent Torino. Vincent Torino, the alleged organized crime figure? The same one who loaned Marcus $800,000 for gambling debts. The same one who's been funding Patricia Blackwood's defense of my family. Stahl glanced at her notes. These are serious allegations, Elena. Do you have proof of Torino's involvement? The FBI does. Financial records showing payments from Torino's organization to Blackwood's firm, to the witnesses who've been lying about me, even to Dr. Kimmel's former practice to access his prescription pads and medical forms. I could see the story transforming in real time. What had started as a domestic dispute was revealing itself as something much larger and more sinister. Let's go back to the beginning, Stahl said. Tell me about the drugs you were being given. I pulled out a small plastic bag containing the pills I'd saved from the cabin. These are the vitamins Marcus gave me the morning he tried to kill me. The FBI analysis shows they contain Rohypnol, Ambien, and Quetiapine, the same antipsychotic that appeared in the fake medical records. And you saved these? I'd been pretending to take them for 3 days while gathering evidence. I knew something was wrong, but I needed proof. Stahl examined the pills through the plastic bag. What made you suspicious? Little things at first. The way Marcus started being overly affectionate after years of growing distant. The insurance policy he was so eager for me to sign. The way Jason and Melissa suddenly wanted to spend time together as a family. But the real warning sign was when I overheard them planning my death. You actually heard them discussing killing you? I heard Marcus say, it has to look natural. Jason ask, what if she fights back? And Melissa reply, she won't. Not with the stuff you've been giving her. I pulled out my phone again. I recorded that conversation. We played the audio, and even though I'd heard it dozens of times, the casual way they discussed my murder still made my skin crawl. When it finished, Stahl was quiet for a long moment. Elena, that's chilling, but I have to ask. Is it possible you misunderstood what you were hearing? Could they have been discussing something else? Like what? What innocent conversation involves talking about making something look natural and discussing whether someone will fight back? I don't know, but defense attorneys are very good at creating alternative explanations for seemingly damning evidence. Then let me show you something else. I pulled up the live stream video on my phone. This is the moment Marcus tried to push me into the lake. Watch his body language. Listen to his words. Does this look like a man trying to help his mentally ill wife? We watched the critical moments together. Marcus's hand on my back. The calculated positioning. The way he said sweet dreams before pushing me toward the water. And watch what happens when I don't fall in as planned, I continued. The video showed the shock on all their faces when I rolled away from the edge instead of toppling into the lake. If this was really about me having a mental breakdown, I said, why would they be surprised that I didn't drown? Wouldn't they be relieved that I was safe? Stahl nodded slowly. It's compelling evidence. But I have to ask about something else. There have been reports that you've had a history of making false accusations, that you've exhibited paranoid behavior in the past. Name one specific incident, I challenged. Ask for dates, times, witnesses who aren't being paid by Vincent Torino. I guarantee you won't find any legitimate examples because they don't exist. What about your former coworker who said you talked about wanting your husband dead? Jennifer Matthews. She's been out of work for 6 months and has a gambling problem of her own. The FBI traced a $10,000 payment to her account the day before she gave that statement. You're suggesting all the witnesses against you have been bought? I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as fact. Every single person who's come forward with negative stories about me has received money from accounts connected to Torino's organization. It's the most elaborate character assassination campaign in recent memory. Stahl looked at her producer, who was standing behind the cameras. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Elena, Stahl said carefully, we've been investigating this story for 3 days. Our fact-checkers have been working around the clock to verify your claims. I have to tell you, everything you've said checks out. Dr. Kimmel is indeed dead. The medical records are forgeries. The witness payments are real. This appears to be exactly what you say it is, an attempted murder covered up by an organized crime conspiracy. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I felt lightheaded. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone with credibility and resources had looked at the evidence objectively and reached the obvious conclusion. But there's something else, Stahl continued. Something we discovered that you might not know about. My stomach tightened. What? This isn't the first time Marcus has been involved in insurance fraud. We found records of a suspicious claim from 12 years ago, shortly after he married you. His first wife, Jason and Melissa's mother, died in what was ruled an accidental drowning. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What are you saying? I'm saying the police are reopening that case. Your live stream may have exposed more than just one attempted murder. It may have revealed that Marcus has done this before. I felt sick. Marcus's first wife, the children's mother, the woman whose memory I'd tried so hard to honor, had he killed her too? The similarities are striking, Stahl continued. An isolated location, water involved, a recent increase in life insurance, and medication that would have made her drowsy and disoriented. Oh my God. Those poor kids. They've been living with their mother's killer all these years. Actually, Stahl said gently, the FBI believes Jason and Melissa knew. Phone records show they were in contact with someone connected to Torino months before your incident. This wasn't a desperate plan conceived in weeks. It was a carefully orchestrated operation that may have been in development for over a year. The full scope of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Marcus tried to kill me, but he'd probably murdered his first wife, and his own children had helped him plan my death. We're going to air this interview in 2 parts, Stahl said. Tonight's episode will focus on your story and the evidence you've presented. Next week's episode will explore the investigation into the first wife's death and the broader criminal conspiracy. As the interview wrapped up, I felt a strange mixture of validation and horror. The truth was finally coming out, but the truth was darker and more twisted than I'd ever imagined. Walking out of the CBS building that afternoon, flanked by FBI agents and Morrison's security team, I realized that my live stream from the dock had done more than save my life. It had pulled the thread that was unraveling one of the most complex criminal conspiracies in recent memory. But I also knew that meant the danger was far from over. If Marcus had killed before and gotten away with it, if Torino was willing to fund an elaborate cover-up, then my exposing the truth had made me a threat to people who had already proven they were willing to kill to protect their secrets. As we drove back to the safe house, Agent Chen's phone rang. She listened for a moment, then her face went pale. "What is it?" I asked. "Vincent Torino was found dead in his car an hour ago. Single gunshot to the head, execution style." Morrison looked grim. "Someone's cleaning house, eliminating loose ends. Which means," Agent Chen said, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror, "you're probably next on their list." The 60 Minutes interview would air in 3 hours, exposing the conspiracy to the entire world. But as we raced through Chicago traffic toward the safe house, I wondered if I would live long enough to see the justice I'd been fighting for. The safe house felt more like a bunker now. After Torino's execution, Agent Chen had tripled security and installed additional surveillance equipment that turned every window into a potential sniper's nest and every delivery truck into a threat. I watched the 60 Minutes interview from behind bulletproof glass, surrounded by federal agents who spoke in hushed tones about credible threats and active elimination protocols. The response to the broadcast was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour of the show ending, near justice for Elena was trending worldwide. Patricia Blackwood's law firm was flooded with angry phone calls, and the Cook County District Attorney announced a press conference for the following morning. But the victory felt hollow as I watched Agent Chen pace the living room, her phone pressed to her ear in what sounded like increasingly urgent conversations with her supervisors. "What's happening?" I asked when she finally hung up. "3 more bodies," she said grimly. "Jennifer Matthews, the coworker who lied about you wanting Marcus dead, found shot in her apartment 2 hours ago. Dr. Kimmel's former office manager, the one who would have had access to his prescription pads, car bomb in the hospital parking garage. And Linda Morrison, your neighbor who gave those interviews about your disturbing behavior, apparent suicide by pills, but the scene looked staged." Morrison, who'd been working on his laptop in the corner, looked up with alarm. "They're eliminating everyone who could testify about the conspiracy." "It's worse than that," Agent Chen continued. "We think whoever's behind this has a list of everyone involved, and they're working through it systematically. 3 of the witnesses we identified as taking payments from Torino's organization have disappeared. Their families haven't heard from them in 24 hours. I felt ice forming in my stomach. "What about Marcus, Jason, and Melissa?" "Still in federal lockup, maximum security. They're probably safer than anyone right now." "Probably." Agent Chen's expression was grim. "Elena, we need to discuss relocating you. Witness protection, new identity, the full program. Whoever's cleaning house has resources we didn't anticipate. The thought of disappearing forever, of losing my name and my life even though I'd done nothing wrong, made me sick. I won't run. I didn't survive a murder attempt just to spend the rest of my life hiding." "You might not have a choice," Morrison said quietly. "My firm received a package this morning." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of what looked like a funeral wreath with a card attached. "The card has your name on it and today's date." Before I could respond, Agent Chen's phone rang again. She answered with her usual professional greeting, but I watched her face go white as she listened. "When?" she asked. "How many?" A pause. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just concern, but fear. "We need to go. Now." "Where?" "The morgue. They want you to identify a body." The Cook County morgue was a sterile maze of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells that seemed designed to strip away any illusion that death was peaceful or dignified. Dr. Richard Carmichael, the chief medical examiner, met us in the lobby, with the kind of grim expression that suggested bad news was about to get worse. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, shaking my hand with the careful gentleness medical professionals use around trauma victims. "I'm sorry to bring you here under these circumstances, but we need your help identifying someone." He led us through a series of security doors and down a hallway lined with examination rooms. The smell of formaldehyde grew stronger with each step. "The body was found in the Chicago River this morning," Dr. Carmichael explained as we walked. "No identification, but several factors suggest a connection to your case." We stopped outside a viewing room with a large window that looked into an examination area. A sheet-covered form lay on the metal table, and I braced myself for whatever horror I was about to see. "Before we proceed," Dr. Carmichael said, "I need to warn you that this individual appears to have been tortured before death. The injuries are extensive." He nodded to a technician who pulled back the sheet to reveal the face and upper torso. I gasped and stumbled backward into Morrison's arms. Even with the obvious signs of violence, I recognized the face immediately. "That's Dr. Robert Kimmel," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Agent Chen and Morrison exchanged sharp looks. "That's impossible," Agent Chen said. "Dr. Kimmel died 6 months ago in a car accident." Dr. Carmichael's expression was grim. "That's what we thought too, but the dental records are conclusive. This is Dr. Robert Kimmel, and he's been dead for less than 48 hours. The implications hit me like a physical blow. He's been alive this whole time? It appears so. The car accident 6 months ago was staged. Dr. Kimmel has been in hiding, probably under duress, and someone has been using his identity to create fake medical records. But why kill him now? Dr. Carmichael gestured to the examination table. Because he was about to talk. We found this in his pocket. He handed Agent Chen a small digital recorder. She pressed play, and Dr. Kimmel's voice filled the room, shaky, but determined. My name is Dr. Robert Kimmel. If you're hearing this, I'm probably dead. 6 months ago, men working for Vincent Torino forced me to fake my own death after I refused to help them frame Elena Hartwell for mental illness. They've been holding me captive, forcing me to sign fake prescriptions and medical records. Elena Hartwell has never been my patient. She's never received psychiatric treatment from me or anyone else. The documents bearing my signature are forgeries created under duress. I'm recording this because I can't live with being part of a conspiracy to destroy an innocent woman's life. The recording continued with Dr. Kimmel providing specific details about the fake medical records, the locations where he'd been held, and the names of the people involved in the conspiracy. It was devastating evidence that would have destroyed Marcus's defense completely. When was this recorded? Agent Chen asked. Dr. Carmichael checked the device's timestamp. Yesterday morning, about 3 hours before your 60 Minutes interview aired. He was trying to come forward, Morrison said. Someone found out and killed him before he could make it official. I stared at the covered body, feeling a mixture of horror and guilt. Dr. Kimmel had died because he'd tried to tell the truth about what they'd done to me. There's something else, Dr. Carmichael said. Something you need to see. He led us to another examination room where a second body lay, under a sheet. This man was found with Dr. Kimmel, he said, pulling back the cover. The face was unfamiliar to me, but Agent Chen sucked in a sharp breath. Anthony Marconi, she said. Torino's lieutenant. We've been looking for him for weeks. Cause of death? Morrison asked. Single gunshot to the head, same as Torino. Professional execution. But here's what's interesting. Marconi was killed first, probably 24 hours before Dr. Kimmel. Then Dr. Kimmel was tortured, probably to find out what he'd told Marconi, or who else he might have contacted. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was more terrifying than I'd imagined. Someone was systematically eliminating everyone connected to the conspiracy, including the people who'd been running it. Who would have the power to kill Vincent Torino's organization? I asked. Agent Chen and Dr. Carmichael exchanged a look that suggested they knew more than they were saying. There are rumors, Agent Chen said carefully, about someone higher up the food chain who's been cleaning house in Chicago's organized crime families. Someone who doesn't tolerate loose ends or failed operations. You're talking about someone more powerful than Torino? Much more powerful. And much more dangerous. As we prepared to leave the morgue, Dr. Carmichael handed Agent Chen a thick file. My complete analysis of both bodies, he said. But there's something else. Something I discovered that changes everything. He pulled out a series of photographs showing close-ups of tattoos on both bodies. These markings, he said, pointing to small symbols near each man's shoulder blade. They're not random tattoos. They're identification marks used by a specific organization. What kind of organization? Morrison asked. The kind that specializes in making people disappear. And Mrs. Hartwell, according to my sources, you're at the top of their current list. The drive back to the safe house was tense and quiet. Agent Chen was on her phone constantly, arranging for additional security and coordinating with other federal agencies. Morrison was working on legal documents that would formalize my placement in witness protection, whether I wanted it or not. But I couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Kimmel's recording, about the courage it had taken for him to make that statement, knowing it would probably cost him his life. I want to release the recording, I said suddenly. Agent Chen looked at me in the rearview mirror. That's evidence in a federal investigation. We can't, you can't, but I can. Dr. Kimmel died trying to tell the truth. The least I can do is make sure his sacrifice means something. Elena, Morrison said carefully, Releasing that recording would essentially be signing your own death warrant. Whoever's behind this will know you have access to information that could destroy them. They already know that, and they're already trying to kill me. When we arrived at the safe house, I made my decision. Despite the protests of everyone around I uploaded Dr. Kimmel's recording to every social media platform I could access, along with a simple message. Dr. Robert Kimmel died yesterday, trying to expose the truth about my case. He was tortured and murdered to keep him silent. This is his final statement, and it proves everything I've been saying. Justice for Dr. Kimmel. Justice for all the victims. The response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, the recording was being shared thousands of times. News organizations were calling it the smoking gun that proved a vast criminal conspiracy. Legal experts were calling for immediate federal intervention. But 30 minutes after I posted the recording, Agent Chen's phone rang with a call that made her face go pale. "What is it?" I asked. "A body just turned up outside the federal building downtown," she said grimly. "Patricia Blackwood, shot execution style with a note pinned to her jacket." "What does the note say?" Agent Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "It says Elena Hartwell is next." As police sirens wailed in the distance and Agent Chen coordinated with her emergency response team, I realized that exposing the truth had painted an even bigger target on my back. Whoever was behind this conspiracy wasn't just eliminating witnesses, they were making it personal. The war for my life was entering its final phase, and the enemy had just declared that there would be no survivors. The emergency relocation happened. So fast I barely had time to grab my purse. Agent Chen and her team bundled me into an armored SUV while a decoy convoy headed in the opposite direction. We drove through the Chicago night with no destination except away from here, while Chen coordinated with federal agencies I'd never heard of. "Where are we going?" I asked as we merged onto the interstate. "Quantico," Chen replied without taking her eyes off the road. "Federal protection facility. No one gets in or out without clearance from the director himself." Morrison was in the passenger seat, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. Patricia Blackwood's murder had hit him harder than I'd expected. Apparently, they'd been law school classmates before taking very different career paths. "She was brilliant," he said quietly. "Completely unethical, but brilliant. If someone could kill her this easily, with this much security around the case..." He didn't finish the sentence, but we all understood. If Patricia Blackwood, one of the most protected and well-connected lawyers in the country, could be executed in broad daylight outside a federal building, then no one was safe. My phone buzzed with yet another notification. The number of people following my social media accounts had exploded to over 8 million in the past 24 hours, and Dr. Kimmel's recording had been viewed more than 50 million times worldwide. But along with the support came an avalanche of death threats that grew more specific and terrifying by the hour. "You should stop reading those," Chen advised, glancing at my phone in the rearview mirror. "Someone sent me a photo of my childhood. Home in Ohio," I said, scrolling through the messages. "And another one found my college roommate's address. How is that even possible?" "Professional intelligence gathering," Morrison said grimly. "The kind of resources we're dealing with here have access to databases most law enforcement agencies can only dream of." 3 hours later, we arrived at a facility that looked more like a high-tech fortress than anything I'd imagined. Multiple security checkpoints, armed guards, and electronic scanners that seemed to analyze everything from my fingerprints to my DNA before allowing us inside. The briefing room where they took me felt like something out of a spy movie. Floor-to-ceiling monitors, secure communication terminals, and a conference table surrounded by people whose nameplates identified them as representatives from agencies I hadn't known existed. "Mrs. Hartwell," said a woman who introduced herself only as Director Walsh. She was tall, silver-haired, and carried herself with the kind of authority that suggested she was used to making life-and-death decisions. "Thank you for coming. Did he..." I have a choice? Not really, she admitted with a slight smile. Your case has evolved beyond a simple domestic crime. We're now looking at threats to national security. National security? My husband tried to kill me for insurance money. Your husband was a small player in a much larger game, Walsh said, activating one of the wall monitors. What you stumbled into when you live-streamed that murder attempt was the outer edge of an international criminal network that we've been tracking for 3 years. The screen filled with organizational charts, photographs, and financial records that painted a picture so complex I could barely follow it. Names and faces connected by lines and arrows, money flowing between countries, operations spanning multiple continents. Vincent Torino wasn't just a loan shark, Walsh continued. He was a middleman for an organization called the Consortium, a group of international criminals who specialize in insurance fraud, identity theft, and contract killing. They've been operating in major cities across the world, targeting individuals with significant life insurance policies. She clicked to another screen showing a map dotted with red markers. 17 countries, 43 cities, over 200 confirmed victims in the past 5 years. All staged accidents, all involving recently increased life insurance policies, all with grieving family members who collect the money and disappear. I stared at the map, feeling sick. How many people like me? You're the first one who survived and exposed the operation. Every other victim died exactly as planned. Morrison leaned forward. Are you saying Elena's case isn't unique? That there are organized groups systematically murdering people for insurance money? It's a billion-dollar industry, Walsh said matter-of-factly. The consortium identifies targets, usually people in failing marriages or with strained family relationships, then recruits family members to participate in staged accidents. They provide the expertise, the forged documents, the witness intimidation, everything needed to make it look natural. But Marcus found them, not the other way around, I protested. Actually, they found him. Our investigation shows the consortium has been monitoring your family's financial situation for over 2 years. They knew about Marcus's gambling debts, Jason and Melissa's financial problems, even Sarah's scam operations. When the time was right, they made contact. Walsh pulled up another screen showing financial records and communication logs. The first contact was made 14 months ago, shortly after you and Marcus took out the new insurance policy. A man identifying himself as a financial consultant reached out to Marcus about investment opportunities. From there, they slowly recruited him into the conspiracy. 14 months, I said, the timeline hitting me like a punch. They've been planning to kill me for over a year. The consortium is patient. They spend months, sometimes years, setting up each operation. By the time they're ready to act, every detail has been planned and every contingency covered. Then how did I survive? Walsh smiled grimly. Because you did something none of their other victims ever did. You fought back. The live stream caught them completely off guard. They had no protocol for dealing with a victim who exposed the operation in real time to millions of people. Agent Chen, who'd been quiet during the briefing, finally spoke up. So who's been killing the witnesses? If the consortium's operation was exposed, why the cleanup? Walsh's expression darkened. Because there's someone above the consortium. Someone who considers the entire operation compromised and everyone involved to be liabilities. She activated another monitor showing surveillance footage from various crime scenes. Torino's car, Patricia Blackwood outside the federal building, Dr. Kimmel's body being pulled from the river. We call him the architect. Real name unknown, nationality unknown, but he appears to be the mastermind behind multiple international criminal organizations. When one of his operations gets exposed, he eliminates everyone involved, including his own people. How do you know about him if you don't know who he is? Because he's done this before. Operation Nightfall in London, an identity theft ring that got exposed by a journalist. 37 people dead within a week, including the journalist. Project Mirage in Tokyo. Money laundering operation that was discovered by banking regulators. 42 people eliminated, including 3 government officials. The pattern was clear and terrifying. He's going to keep killing people until everyone who knows about the conspiracy is dead. That's his standard protocol. Complete elimination of all witnesses, all evidence, all connections. Usually takes about 2 weeks. Morrison asked the question I was afraid to hear answered. How many people on his list? Walsh pulled up another screen showing a network diagram with dozens of names and photographs. Based on our analysis, probably 60 to 80 people have direct knowledge of the conspiracy. As of this morning, 23 of them are confirmed dead. My photograph was at the center of the diagram, with lines connecting me to every other person involved. I was the nexus, the one witness whose testimony could expose the entire operation. I'm not just a target, I realized. I'm the primary target. As long as I'm alive, I can connect all the pieces. Exactly. Which is why we're not just protecting you, we're using you as bait. The room went silent. Morrison looked like he was about to explode. You want to use her as bait? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. She's a civilian who's already survived 1 murder attempt. She's not some agent trained for this kind of operation. She's also our best chance to catch the architect, Walsh replied calmly. He's going to keep coming after her no matter what we do. The question is whether we wait for him to strike, or we create conditions that force him into the open where we can capture him. Absolutely not, Morrison said. I won't allow my client to be used as bait in some federal operation. Charles, I said quietly. What exactly are you proposing? Walsh activated another monitor, showing what looked like a luxury hotel suite. Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala at the Palmer House Hilton. High-profile event, lots of security, perfect opportunity for the architect to make his move. We want you to attend. You want me to walk into a public event where an international assassin is planning to kill me? We want you to walk into a controlled environment where we have over 100 federal agents positioned to catch him when he tries. Morrison was shaking his head. This is insane. You're asking her to paint a target on her back and walk into a crowd of 1,000 people. The target's already there, Walsh said bluntly. Elena, the architect is going to come for you whether you're hiding in a bunker or standing in the middle of Grant Park. At least this way, we can control the environment and have a chance to stop him. I looked around the room at all the serious faces, all the sophisticated equipment, all the evidence of a conspiracy so vast and complex that I could barely comprehend it. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a suburban housewife worried about my stepchildren's attitudes. Now I was apparently the key witness in an international criminal investigation. What happens if you catch him? I asked. We shut down the consortium permanently. No more staged accidents, no more murdered spouses, no more families destroyed, for insurance money. And if you don't catch him? He keeps killing people until everyone who knows about the operation is dead, including you, eventually. The choice, when I really thought about it, wasn't much of a choice at all. I could spend the rest of my life hiding, knowing that people were dying because I was too afraid to help stop it. Or I could take the risk and maybe end this nightmare for everyone. What exactly would I have to do at this gala? Walsh pulled up a floor plan of the hotel. Appear in public, give a brief speech about your experience, make yourself visible and accessible. Our agents will be positioned throughout the venue, and we'll have electronic surveillance covering every inch of the building. You're using me as bait to draw out the most dangerous criminal in the world, I said slowly. In a room full of innocent people who could get caught in the crossfire. We've considered that risk. The gala attendees will be pre-screened, and we'll have evacuation protocols in place. But Elena, I need you to understand something. If we don't stop the architect now, while we have this opportunity, he'll disappear and we may never get another chance. I thought about Dr. Kimmel, tortured and killed for trying to tell the truth, about Patricia Blackwood, executed for representing the wrong clients, about all the victims whose names I'd never know, people who'd died in staged accidents around the world. "I'll do it," I said. Morrison looked like I'd just signed my own death warrant. "Elena, please reconsider. There has to be another way." "There isn't," I said firmly. "And I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid. If this ends tomorrow night, one way or another, then that's better than spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." Walsh nodded approvingly. "We'll begin preparations immediately. Elena, I need you to know that this operation has been approved at the highest levels of government. You'll have every resource the federal government can provide. Just promise me one thing," I said. "When this is over, whether I survive or not, you'll make sure the truth about all of this comes out. The victims, the conspiracy, everything. People need to know what these monsters have been doing. You have my word." As the meeting broke up and agents began making preparations for what they were calling Operation Endgame, I sat alone in the conference room staring at my photograph in the center of that network diagram. Tomorrow night, I would either help bring down one of the world's most dangerous criminals, or I would become his final victim. Either way, the nightmare that began with a live stream from a dock in Wisconsin was finally going to end. I just hoped I would live to see justice served. The Palmer House Hilton glittered like a jewel in the heart of Chicago's financial district, its windows blazing with warm light against the cold November night. As my armored sedan pulled up to the red carpet entrance, I could see the flash of cameras and the gathering crowd of reporters who'd been covering my story for the past week. What they didn't know was that tonight might be the final chapter. "Remember," Agent Chen said through my earpiece, "natural behavior, stick to the script, and trust that we're watching every angle." I touched the tiny microphone hidden in my diamond necklace, a gift from the FBI's tech team that could transmit my voice to the command center they'd established in the hotel's executive suite. Every word I spoke tonight would be recorded, every movement tracked by dozens of cameras positioned throughout the venue. "Mrs. Hartwell?" The hotel's events coordinator appeared at my car door, flanked by security personnel who I knew were actually federal agents. "We're ready for you." Taking a deep breath, I stepped out onto the red carpet. The explosion of camera flashes was blinding, and the shouts from reporters created a wall of sound that made it impossible to think clearly. "Elena! Elena! How does it feel to be the most famous victim in America? Are you afraid the consortium will try to kill you tonight? What's your message to other families who might be planning insurance fraud?" I smiled and waved, playing the part of the brave survivor while scanning the crowd for any face that seemed wrong, any movement that felt threatening. According to Director Walsh's briefing, the architect could be anyone, man or woman, any age, any nationality. The only thing they knew for certain was that he was here, somewhere in this crowd or inside the hotel, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The ballroom was a vision of elegance and wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white roses and gold accents, while Chicago's elite mingled in their finest evening wear. Under normal circumstances, I would have felt intimidated by such opulence. Tonight, I felt like I was walking through a beautiful death trap. "Elena Hartwell." A woman in a stunning red gown approached with arms outstretched. "I'm Margaret Whitman, chairwoman of the Chicago Children's Hospital Foundation. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak tonight." Margaret Whitman was exactly who she claimed to be. The FBI had verified everyone on the guest list 3 times. But I'd learned not to trust appearances. Some of the most dangerous people in my life had seemed perfectly normal until they tried to kill me. "Thank you for having me," I replied, shaking her hand while mentally cataloging every person within 20 feet. "It's an honor to support such an important cause. Your story has been so inspiring to so many people," Margaret continued. "The courage you showed in exposing your family's plot. It's given hope to abuse victims everywhere." As we spoke, I caught glimpses of federal agents positioned throughout the room. A waiter who moved with military precision. A photographer, whose camera equipment looked suspiciously sophisticated. A string quartet where the violinist had the kind of alertness that suggested combat training. "If you'll excuse me," Margaret said, "I need to check on a few last-minute details. You're speaking right after dinner, around 9:30. That gave me 2 hours to circulate, to make myself visible, to wait for whatever was coming. I accepted. A glass of champagne from a passing waiter and began moving through the crowd, smiling and making small talk while every nerve in my body screamed danger. Elena Hartwell, as I live and breathe. I turned to find a distinguished older man in an impeccable tuxedo approaching with a warm smile. He was tall, silver-haired, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from wealth and power. "I'm sorry," I said. "Have we met?" "Jonathan Ashford," he said, extending his hand. "I knew your late employer, Catherine Morrison. She spoke of you often. Catherine had been dead for 6 months, and in all the chaos of recent events, I'd barely had time to grieve for the woman who'd changed my life." Hearing her name now, in this place, made my chest tight with emotion. "Catherine was wonderful," I said carefully. "How did you know her?" "Business associates for many years. Insurance? Investments, that sort of thing." His smile never wavered, but something in his eyes made my skin crawl. "She always said you were like a daughter to her." The pieces clicked together in my mind with terrifying clarity. Catherine's mysterious fortune, the convenient timing of her death, the trust fund that had made me wealthy enough to be worth murdering. "You're him," I whispered, my blood turning to ice. "You're the architect." Jonathan Ashford, if that was even his real name, chuckled softly. "Such a dramatic name. I prefer to think of myself as a problem solver." I tried to step backward, but he moved with me, maintaining the perfect distance for polite conversation while keeping me trapped against a pillar decorated with roses. "Catherine figured it out, didn't she?" I said, my voice barely steady. "She realized what you were doing." Catherine was brilliant, but she lacked vision. She thought small. One operation, one target, one payout. I showed her the potential for something much larger. She refused to be part of it. She threatened to expose everything, said she wouldn't let innocent people be murdered for money. His smile turned cold. Catherine was always too sentimental, for her own good. The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You killed her." "Lung cancer," he said smoothly. "Very aggressive, very sudden. Though I suppose the specific medication that accelerated her condition could be considered unnatural. I felt sick. Catherine hadn't died of natural causes. She'd been murdered by this monster, just like Dr. Kimmel, just like Patricia Blackwood, just like dozens of other people around the world. "The inheritance," I said. "You made sure I got it." Catherine had already changed her will. I simply expedited the process. $8 million makes for a very attractive life insurance target. "Why are you telling me this? Why reveal yourself?" Ashford glanced around the ballroom with satisfaction. "Because in about 30 seconds, there's going to be a terrible accident. A gas leak in the kitchen, an explosion, a tragic fire that kills everyone in this room. Including me, of course. I'll be identified as another victim. But my death will be staged, just like Dr. Kimmel's was supposed to be." My earpiece crackled to life. "Elena, we've lost visual contact. Where are you?" I tried to move, but Ashford's hand closed around my wrist with surprising strength. "The FBI's surveillance system is quite sophisticated," he continued conversationally. "But not sophisticated enough to detect the electromagnetic pulse device I activated 5 minutes ago. Their cameras, their communications, their entire electronic infrastructure is now offline." "Help!" I shouted, but my voice was lost in the crowd's chatter and the string quartet's music. 37 years I've been building this network," Ashford said, his grip tightening. "Hundreds of successful operations, billions of dollars in. Fraudulent insurance claims, thousands of eliminated witnesses. And it's all about to end because one suburban housewife was too stubborn to die quietly. The FBI knows about you. They have evidence. They have theories and suspicions. Without you to testify, without the connections you can make between the various operations, they have nothing that will hold up in court. Through the ballroom's windows, I could see smoke beginning to pour from the hotel's lower floors. Whatever Ashford had planned was already in motion. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice over the public address system, "due to a minor technical issue in the kitchen, we need to evacuate the building immediately. Please proceed to the nearest exit in an orderly fashion." The crowd began moving toward the doors, but I could see that some of the exits were already blocked by men in hotel uniforms who were definitely not hotel employees. Ashford had turned the entire evacuation into a trap. "You see," he said, pulling me toward a side door that led to the hotel's service areas. "Sometimes the old methods are still the best. No elaborate plots, no staged accidents, just a simple fire that kills everyone inside." We passed through the door into a corridor filled with smoke and the acrid smell of accelerant. Ashford was leading me toward the building's core, away from any possible escape routes. "The beautiful irony," he continued, "is that your death will be seen as the ultimate victory for the conspiracy you tried to expose. The brave whistleblower who died in a tragic accident, along with hundreds of Chicago's most prominent citizens. It will be the perfect ending to a very imperfect operation." That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the smoky corridor behind us. Not the panicked running of fleeing guests, but the measured pace of someone moving with purpose. "Elena!" Agent Chen's voice cut through the smoke and chaos. "Where are you?" Ashford cursed and pulled a gun from inside his tuxedo jacket. I was hoping to avoid direct confrontation, but sometimes adaptation is necessary. "How did they find us?" I asked, stalling for time. "Your necklace. The tracking device wasn't just for audio. It has a GPS beacon that works independently of the main surveillance system." The footsteps were getting closer, and I could hear more voices now. The entire federal operation hadn't been neutralized. After all. "Elena!" Chen called again, her voice much closer now. Ashford pressed the gun against my ribs. "One word, one sound, and I'll kill you and as many agents as possible before they take me down." But I'd learned something important over the past 2 weeks. Sometimes the only way to save your life is to risk it completely. "Here!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "He's got a gun!" Ashford pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the narrow corridor, but the bullet went wide as I threw myself sideways into the wall. Ashford spun to face the approaching agents, but Chen was already there, her weapon drawn and her training evident in every movement. "Federal agent, drop your weapon." Instead of complying, Ashford smiled that same cold smile he'd worn throughout our conversation. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said calmly. "I've been killing people since before you were born." "And now you're done," Chen replied. "Actually," Ashford said, "I'm just getting started." He raised his gun toward Chen, but before he could fire, another shot rang out from behind me. Director Walsh appeared through the smoke, her weapon smoking, her expression grimly satisfied. Ashford looked down at the spreading red stain on his white shirt with what seemed like genuine surprise. "Well," he said softly, "that's unexpected." He collapsed against the wall, his gun clattering to the floor. "Secure the scene," Walsh ordered, "and get the paramedics in here." As Chen handcuffed the wounded Ashford, Walsh helped me to my feet. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," I said, though I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. "Is it over?" "Not quite," Walsh said, pulling out her phone. "But we've got the architect alive, and that's more than we dared hope for." The next few hours passed in a blur of paramedics, debriefings, and federal agents securing evidence. The fire had been contained to the kitchen area. Ashford's plan had been interrupted before it could fully develop. The evacuation had saved most of the gala attendees, though several people had been injured in the panic. But as dawn broke over Chicago, I found myself sitting in another federal building, watching through bulletproof glass as Jonathan Ashford was processed for crimes that spanned multiple decades and dozens of countries. "He's talking," Agent Chen told me as she brought me coffee and a change of clothes. "Already given us locations of safe houses, names of contacts, financial records. He knows his organization is finished, so he's trying to negotiate a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Life in prison instead of execution. Information about other operations in exchange for avoiding the death penalty." I thought about Catherine, about Dr. Kimmel, about all the victims whose names I'd never know. "He doesn't deserve a deal." "Maybe not," Chen agreed. "But the information he's providing will help us shut down similar operations around the world. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about preventing future crimes." Director Walsh appeared in the doorway, holding a thick file that I recognized as my case folder. "Elena," she said, "there's something you need to know. We've been monitoring Marcus, Jason, and Melissa since their arrest. This morning, they agreed to testify against the consortium in exchange for reduced sentences. They're going to cooperate? Completely. Marcus is providing details about how he was recruited. Jason and Melissa are admitting their knowledge of both murder plots, yours and their mother's. Sarah Mitchell has already given a full confession about her role. It was almost anticlimactic. After everything I'd been through, the people who'd tried to kill me were simply giving up. What happens to them? Marcus will probably get life, without parole for the murder of his first wife. Jason and Melissa might get 20 to 30 years for conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Sarah could be out in 10 to 15 years if she continues cooperating. I felt empty, rather, than vindicated. Justice was being served, but it couldn't bring back the dead or undo the betrayal. "And me?" I asked. "What happens to me now?" Walsh smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "You go home. You live your life. You write a book, maybe, or start a foundation for other victims. You do whatever you want because you're free. Free." It was a word that had lost all meaning over the past 2 weeks. But sitting there in that federal building with the morning sun streaming through the windows, I began to understand what it meant again. 3 months later, I stood in front of the Chicago Children's Hospital, the same charity that had hosted the gala where I'd finally confronted my demons. But this time, I wasn't there as bait or as a victim. I was there as a donor. The Elena Hartwell Foundation for Victim Protection had been established with most of Catherine's inheritance. $8 million couldn't bring back the dead, but it could help other people escape the kind of predators who'd tried to destroy me. "Mrs. Hartwell," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the hospital's chief administrator, "this donation will allow us to establish a domestic violence protection program that could save hundreds of lives." "That's what Catherine would have wanted," I said, signing the final papers. As I walked out of the hospital and into the bright spring sunshine, my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Ashford sentenced to death this morning. Multiple life sentences without parole. Justice served." I deleted the message without responding. The architect's fate was no longer my concern. I'd spent 2 weeks living in his shadow, and I refused to give him even one more moment of my attention. Instead, I called my new assistant, a young woman, named Rebecca, who was helping me manage the foundation, and asked her to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. "Any particular reason?" she asked. "I want to go shopping," I said, surprising myself with the normalcy of the request. "Maybe buy some flowers for my apartment, pick up a new book, get dinner somewhere with terrible service and overpriced wine." Rebecca laughed. "Sounds perfectly ordinary." Exactly. As I walked through downtown Chicago, blending into the crowd of ordinary people living their ordinary lives, I realized that surviving had been only the beginning. Learning to live again, to trust again, to hope again, to believe that tomorrow would be better than yesterday, that was the real victory. My phone buzzed once more, this time with a notification that my book had hit #1 on the bestseller list. Betrayed by Blood: How I Survived My Family's Murder Plot had become a cultural phenomenon, sparking conversations about domestic violence, financial abuse, and the dangers of misplaced trust. But for me, the book's success meant something simpler. Other people would learn from my experience. Other victims would recognize the warning signs. Other families would understand that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to fear the most. The story that began with a live stream from a dock in Wisconsin had become something larger than I'd ever imagined. It had exposed an international criminal conspiracy, brought down one of the world's most dangerous killers, and given hope to countless victims who'd felt powerless against their abusers. But as I sat in a small cafe near Lake Michigan, watching, the sun set over the water where it all began, I knew that the most important part of the story was the simplest. I had survived. I had fought back. I had won. And for the first time in my adult life, I was truly, completely free. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.